That's for our midday devotional. Today is Wednesday already. Two things happen on today. One is our midday devotional. Two is it is Wednesday and we will have Bible class later today at 7:30 p.m. Uh, I will actually do the Bible class live from the church building. I will be the only one in the building as far as I know, but I will do the live uh, Bible class beginning at 7:15 p.m. with the devotional singing, and then the class itself will begin at 7:30 p.m. But just be reminded, tonight's class will be streamed live from the church building. And I'm doing that to get myself back in the routine of being at the building on Wednesdays to do the midweek studies. I hope that you've had a restful evening yesterday, a productive morning thus far. So, right now, we're going to just enjoy about 15 minutes of singing. And at noon today, we will resume our midweek devotional study. Thanks for joining us again today. What the world needs now is love, sweet think of your family, lend him a helping hand, put a little love in your heart, just do it. You see it's getting late, please don't hesitate, put a little love in your heart, just do it. And the world will be a better place, and the world will be a better place for you and me. Just wait and see for you and you just wait and see. Wait and see. Another day go by, still the children cry. Love, sweet love, to know we won't let hatred grow. Want the world to know it, and the world will be a better place. And the world will be a better place. For you and me, just wait and see. For you and you, just wait and see. Wait and see. There is a yellow one that won't accept the black, one that won't accept the red, one that won't accept the white, one that has looking love in your heart. Put a little bit of love in your heart, We got this for me, you guys. Love in your heart, and the world will be a better place, and the world will be a better place for you and me. Just wait and see for you and you just wait and see. Devotion, put a little love in your heart. Just a little love in your heart. Genuine love, some love, some love and affection. A little love in your heart. And a man laid down their life for a friend. People all over the world. It makes a great joy. And wouldn't it be nice to start a love train? Yeah. To start a love train. Better
have, I know we need to have a little love. You know we need it, you know we need it, you know we need it. How about Sunday? Yeah, there's no greater love than this. That a man lay down in love for a friend. Okay, we try.
Again, I thank you for joining us for our third Wednesday morning devotional. Yesterday morning, I made comment about Mrs. Beverly Eddy, the owner director of the daycare center down on the first floor, being transported to the hospital because of heart fluttering. I want you to know that God has given grace to her. They kept her overnight at the hospital, but she is doing better and she's scheduled to be released from for home today. They want her to just kind of get bed rest over the next 24, 48 hours. But again, thank you for your prayers on her behalf. And then last night, late last night, I received a telephone call from Brother Gary Tatum informing me that his granddaughter, Sanaya, had been picked up. And she's safe and she's being checked out today. But she's safe, she's in a secure place, and certainly we're thankful for your ongoing prayers on her behalf as well. That even while she was, her whereabouts were not known, we're all thankful that she is safe and is now back in the custody and care of the services that will render services to her moving forward. So thank you so much for your prayers on Brother Tatum's family behalf as well. Let's enjoy one more song before our midday class. Thank you again for joining us.
I've been saved, Lord. You know that yes, I've been saved.
We've been changed, and we know that we've been changed because God has signed his name to the new name change. I'm glad that you've joined us for our midday devotional. Today, again, is Wednesday. Let me reiterate a couple of things that are happening before we start our midday class. First of all, uh, Miss Beverly Eddy, the owner director of the child care downstairs, is still hospitalized, scheduled to be released today. They observed her overnight. They've got her condition stable, and we just want to thank you for your prayers on her behalf. Secondly, I got a call last night from Brother Gary Tatum regarding his granddaughter Sanaya, who had been missing for about a week and a half. Uh, and he wanted us to know that she was found safe, and she is receiving proper attention, the proper care now. And moving forward, he just wanted to thank each of you for your prayers on her behalf. Uh, Many times, God answers prayers in ways that are just beyond our imagination, but nonetheless, He answers prayers, and He answered those prayers within His time frame and not ours. So I just want you to know how much your prayers are appreciated on behalf of the families of this congregation, as well as for this country and the different things that we're going through as a country. The COVID 19 crisis appears to be escalating around the United States. Uh, and because of the escalation, it's putting more and more people at potential risk of contracting the virus. So, because of that, I want to encourage you to please be very careful, uh, be very conscientious of you wearing the protective mask. But for the safety of you, make sure that if people are in your presence, within 6 to 10 feet of you, if they do not have on a mask, please ask them to do so. Or instead of looking directly at them, turn your head or turn your whole body away from them. And the signal that you're sending is you don't have on a mask. And because you do not have on a mask, and you're disrespecting me by not wearing a mask, I've got to now protect me from you And it may seem like I'm being dismissive, but I cannot allow you to talk to me straight on. So now you're forcing me to turn my back on you and put more distance between us. But because the federal government is not going to lead in this, and because in many states they're leaving it up to the local jurisdictions, then I am encouraging each person within any jurisdiction that you're picking up this live video stream, take it upon yourself to protect yourself within the environments that you find yourself. Do not think you're being rude. Do not think you're being dismissive by protecting yourself, because basically what we're being told from the top is every person is on their own. And whatever happens, it's your own fault. So I want to take the fault for keeping myself safe. And I want you to take the fault, the blame for keeping yourself safe. Because if you get sick, then the people at the top are going to say, well, it's their fault because we didn't tell them not to. We just didn't tell them what to do. So they've just taken a neutral position. See, we can't please everybody. And if people are going to lead, whether families, whether in politics, whether in a organization, you've got to come to the understanding you will never, ever be able to make everybody happy. So we may as well do what's right and let people be upset, even if it means mandating from the top that it is an absolute imperative that people wear the mask for the safety of people around us and for the safety of ourselves. I want you to again think with me to the book of Numbers, chapter 20. I've only focused on a few verses, but we're talking about personal responsibility and how even in getting ready to return to a degree of normalcy of life for families, we've dealt with some very, very inopportune situations since March of 2020. But I want you to think with me today about what happened in Numbers chapter 20, verse 11 and verse 12. We talked about verse 11 yesterday. And let me read that, and then I want to share some information with you before we get to verse number 12. Numbers 20, verse 11. Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and the beast did also. Israel was thirsty. The animals were thirsty, right? So Moses has called the people rebels. He allows them to drink, but then after their thirst is quenched, the people and the animals. Now the animals didn't care, but I wonder how did the people feel? I mean, they've gotten what they needed. They were thirsty. The rocks did bring forth water. But I wonder how did they feel toward Moses? I've told many of you this story. It's not original to me. It actually came from a preacher who's dead now, Brother G.P. Holt, who used to be at Kingsley Terrace years ago in Indianapolis. But Brother Holt told the joke one time about this tractor trailer driver. and he was carrying a truck filled with cattle, expensive cows, transporting them from one state to the other. And the truck had a terrible accident and flipped over. It was in the middle of the night. So the driver got out of the truck and, not really knowing what was going on in the rear because he was stunned. But as the driver was coming to his senses, getting out of the cab of the truck, a sheriff patrolman drove up behind the truck, trying to get to the driver of the truck. And as the sheriff was going from the rear, cattle was spewed all over the road, moaning and groaning, and every time the sheriff saw one moan, he'd take out his old 38 and he'd shoot that cow. And he'd walk past, trying to get to the driver, and another cow would moan and groan and he'd shoot the cow. And finally he got to the driver of the truck and he said, "What's wrong with you?" And the driver said, "Nothing. I'm fine." The driver was fearful that the sheriff was going to do to him what he had done to all of the cows who moaned and groaned. The children of Israel were thirsty. The cows were thirsty. And Moses knew they were thirsty. But out of Moses' frustration, Moses had yelled at the people and called them rebels. He yelled at them out of his frustration. And then he hits the rock twice. And the people saw him do that. They've heard him audibly call them out of their name. And now they see him act out on the rocks. As we make efforts to return to a degree of operational normalcy following this COVID-19 crisis, each spouse, each adult must be careful to never allow the actions of the other to create such a contentious and bitterness inside that the peace offering, the offering to help, to make life better, that peace offering should always be held holy and it should always be set apart. We should never allow that holy peace offering to become despised and a cause for additional fighting and separation. Well, what did I just say? The spirit in which we help people through the crises must always be kept holy. The attitude of the adults in the room should always be kept sacred and calming and reassuring and never antagonistic. It is never acceptable for spouses to allow the ungodliness of the other person to make your offering bitter. We've gone through some things in the past 4.5 months that none of us could have imagined. And much of what we are suffering is from the hands of people who would almost make you lose your religion. But God is calling on you and God is calling on me to not allow individuals and their ungodliness, their ineptness, their aloofness. God is calling on us not to allow their behavior to drive our behavior to end up like theirs. The people were in rebellion. The people probably were screaming and yelling at Moses and Aaron. But what the people failed to realize is that it was Moses and Aaron who had got them out of Egypt. And that frustrated the daylights out of Moses. What they also failed to realize, if you look at the first several verses of Numbers chapter 12, I think what the people also failed to realize, Moses was grieving. Miriam, his sister, has died. That's in Numbers chapter 12 also. Numbers chapter 20, I'm sorry. That's in the first few verses of Numbers chapter 20 as well. Moses has lost his sister. This is the sister who put him in the basket. This is the sister who drew him from the water and took him to his mother to raise him. And now she's dead. So many times, people can get so encapsulated in their own struggles that they become oblivious to what other people are going through. In the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, have you become so concerned about you that you haven't taken time to be concerned about somebody else? What your family is going through, what you are going through, what your children are going through, the financial crises that you might be having. Have you become so self-centered that you've not thought about a Moses or an Aaron and their grief? But Moses is frustrated. I wonder if some of that frustration is coming from, I just lost my sister. And the people are still complaining about their thirsty. I want you to look at Numbers chapter 20 and verse number 12. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, because you believe me not to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this congregation into the land which I've given you. Here's what Moses is going to have to pay. God is going to chastise him and say, Moses, I don't care what you're going through. The loss of your sister, the frustration of the people. At all times, you must sanctify me. In other words, you must present me in a reverent way. You must respect me in a godly manner. You must make sure the people always see in you that you respect God no matter what they do, no matter what they say, and no matter how much they're not empathetic toward you. During this past 4.5, 5 months, have you kind of felt like your family didn't appreciate you? That your family didn't care about you? And have you found yourself lashing out at your family, your friends? Don't do it. Don't do it. Because at all times, God expects his people to conduct themselves as his people. I will be the first person in the room to tell you that this administration and how they've handled this COVID-19 crisis, how this country is handling race relationships, it bothers me. It bothers me dearly. But before God's people, I can't lay down my religion and start cussing and swearing and throwing things and becoming belligerent myself. Because whenever I do that, two things are happening. Number one, I'm not modeling correctly before God's people. Number two, I'm disrespecting God. I hope you see the principle that I'm trying to lay before you in our devotional today. As we move back into a place of worship, we must make sure that we come back to the house of worship, not with a chip on our shoulder about what has happened while we are away. We've all gone through this thing at some level. We've all had family crises at some level. But none of us are given the permission of God to be around the people of God mad and cussing and fighting and belligerent and disconnected. That's what Moses did in Numbers chapter 20. And what Moses did was a bad example for God's people, and it also cost Moses a trip into the promised land. I know that we are living in challenging times, but God is strengthening each of us as we go through this challenge of life. And I want to encourage you, whether it's with your family, whether it's with your peers, your co-workers, whether it's with your church members, your community members, if it's with your husband, if it's with your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, God expects of his people to always conduct themselves in a manner that shows we reverence and we respect the name of God. I want you to please pray with me at this time. Father, we thank you for watching over Sanaya while she's been away from her family that loves her. I pray today, Father, that as you protect her, as you nurture her with those that you've assigned with that responsibility, I pray, Father, that her heart will be touched in a way that how she thinks and how she responds to life will be changed as well. We thank you for showing grace over Miss Eddie and allowing her later today to return home. We thank you for showing grace over her medical condition. Father, we pray for this country in a special way. Help us, Father, as your children, to be mindful of our behavior, even in the midst of challenging times that we live in. Father, we pray for our doctors and our nurses who are constantly being called on to minister in such a time as this. Keep them safe from harm. And I just pray that all of the glory and honor will be granted to you, because you are our keeper. You are the one who shows mercy on us even when we're not deserving. We love you for who you are. And we just pray that our prayers will be acceptable in your sight. Through Jesus I pray. Amen. Thank you again for joining us today. And I just want to encourage you as we go through this life day by day that we allow the Lord to direct every one of our steps. I look forward to seeing you back on tomorrow.
Order my steps in your word, dear Lord. Lead me, guide me every day. Send your anointing, Father, I pray. Order my steps in your word. Help me, I ask thee, teach me your will. While you are working, help me be still. For Satan is busy, God is here. Order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. Right on my tongue, let my words edify. Let the words of my mouth be acceptable in thy sight. Take charge of my thoughts both day and night. Please order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. Order my steps in your word, dear Lord. Lead me, guide me every day. Send your anointing, Father, I pray. Order my steps in your word. Please order my steps in your word. I want to walk worthy. Lord, I want to walk worthy. My calling to fulfill. Please order my steps, Lord. And I'll do your best it will. The world is never changing. Oh, but you still remain. But you are still the same. If you order my steps, I'll praise your name. Order my steps in your word. Order my tongue in your word. Wash my feet in your word. Wash my heart in your word. Show